Great. So yeah, let's just jump into kind of what it is exactly that you do, and then a little bit of your story of how you got into this, because I'm going to venture to say that wasn't like your first job.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a part of the picture, Casey, for me
Yeah.
when I first got started. No, you're absolutely right. For me, so I'll give you the 10,000 foot overview of what I do. My whole business is based around coaching dad entrepreneurs in how to build their online businesses. I mean, and that's the simplicity of it. I say build their legacies because it's a much deeper, fulfilling reason that why I do what I do, and we can get into that later. But as far as that, that's the like online business coaching. Now, my background had nothing to do really with online business coaching at all. I actually was in finance for about a decade.
Okay.
And so did finance, studied finance in school, managed investment assets and worked with a lot of businesses and did some business coaching on that side for the financial piece, but had not done this whole like internet marketing thing.
Yeah.
And I say internet marketing, I don't really subscribe 100% like wholeheartedly. Like I don't call myself an internet marketer, right? Like I am a relationship builder. I'm a coach, and that's the way that I approach my business. And it's treated me well, and I continue to grow it. But as far as like how I got into this world it was about 2.5 years ago. I was working just all the time. I was in a new job, new role, and I didn't see my family as much as I wanted to. I was so stressed out and had so much anxiety that literally one day I'm sitting at my desk in my office and I can feel my heart start to just beat in my chest. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Like, and it started to get worse and worse. I'm like sweating. I thought I was having a heart attack. And I go to the emergency room, like worried, like I'm for sure, like this is it. This is the end, right? And they run these tests. They hook me up to EKG machines. They run blood work, and they're like, the doc comes in, and doctors like have this way of like, they always look nervous. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, you're like, what's wrong, doc? And he's like, you're probably just stressed out. And I'm like, what? What? I feel like I'm dying here, and you're saying that I'm stressed out. And at that point in my life, I had a lot of different things going on. I was addicted to drugs. I was abusing alcohol. I was really coping with all the stress in these negative ways. Had no like prayer or meditation life. Had no mindfulness. Like I didn't have any of these practices that I practice now. And like I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I not live with these to manage my anxiety? And I was just in a really bad place in my life. And so at that moment in the hospital, I made a commitment to myself. Like I've got to figure out a way that I can create success for my family, right? Because they're the first and one of the most important parts for me, being a dad. And beyond that, I want to create a lifestyle for myself and for my family that is not like 70, 80-hour work weeks. That is when I want to work and when it, in controlled and automated. And like, I was like, how do I do that? Like, and what is that world? And that took me down this huge rabbit hole that is the internet, that is online businesses. And so for 2 years, I just took all these different courses. I still love taking courses and learning, obviously, of my craft. But I took so much. I took in so many courses. I hired coaches. I just like delve into what is this online business. And then I just looked back and I turned around and said, there's all these dads out there that are building businesses that aren't quite to where I am, or, I wanted to help at least launch businesses. And so that's where I got started. That's how I came into this, is like, they can spend more time with their kids. They can have more financial freedom and all these different things that I was able to create that I wanted other dads to experience.
Okay. So when you say you were in a bad place, like obviously like mentally, emotionally, and technically physically, as you were super stressed and alcohol and drugs and stuff, but how did you look to the outside world? Like, did the people in your life know that you were struggling? Did you keep it all inside? Like, were you technically, quote unquote, successful from most of society's standards in terms of the income you were bringing in and the, how you were able to provide for your family and the house you lived and all that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, on the surface level, I looked fine. I had the beautiful family, the kids, like we all dressed a certain way. Like we all look like that middle class, like nice looking family. And at the end of the day, like I had all this I mean, it's crazy, Casey. Like I even look back like at some of the pictures, and I've told my wife this too. Like, and we've had a lot of relationship hurt. I've hurt her a lot because of the drug, the addiction that I had. But looking back at some of the pictures, even from like Christmases, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, like I know I was high in some of those pictures, and I'm like, oh, like it breaks my heart. Like looking at them now, I'm like, oh, like I'm terrible. Like because I'm such in a different place now. But yeah, it was people on the surface maybe just thought I was a normal guy.
Yeah.
Just a normal guy, finance guy, working a normal job, like with a family, normal kind of middle class world. But in reality, like I was hurting really bad, and I was in a low place, and I was just trying to numb the pain.
Did your wife know?
She had suspicions. Yeah, my wife had suspicions for sure. She, she's like super. I give her like we kid around. Like we were opposites in college. Like when we met in college, I was like fraternity boy, like partied hard, like drugs, alcohol. She was a volleyball player, like never got drunk, like two drink max kind of girl, and like never done any drug in her life. And so like she always wanted to be better for her and wanted to be better, and just couldn't beat this addiction for years until I did. And it impacted our relationship in a big way. But I think she knew under the surface, like I think she suspected something was going on. And like me sneaking around, like occasionally would be like my eyes would be red, and she'd be like, "Why are your eyes so red?" Like, "Oh, nothing." I was so good at hiding it at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure she definitely suspected.
Was there anything looking back on that time that she could have, or I guess anybody in your life could have done or said to make you realize that you needed to make some changes prior to you ending up in the hospital, like thinking that you're having a heart attack? Like, or do you think it was just always going to come to that moment?
That's a great question. I mean, I would like to say that there could have been like a magical comment or somebody like giving me a speech, but honestly, that was a lesson that I had to learn. And I still learn so many lessons in my life and still go through ups and downs like we all do. But I think that was a lesson that I had to learn the hard way to realize, first and foremost, like I was in so much denial that I was in addiction. Like I was like, oh, I'm not addicted. Like I could quit whenever I wanted to. But just that denial, I think I had to go through it, to be honest with you.
Okay. So how long ago was this?
Almost 3 years ago.
And how many kids do you have? How old are they now, or how old were they then?
Yeah. So I've got 2 kids now. At the time I just had 1.
Okay.
So at the time my daughter she was very young. She was like a baby. And that was part of it too. Like my daughter was, like in the house, and out here I am like getting high in our garage. Like my daughter's in our house, and so there was a lot of like moments like that where I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
So I think it all came to a head at that point. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm so excited to kind of dive into this because I obviously only know a female perspective. So I kind of, sure. I'm anxious to pick your brain from a male's perspective in terms of, from your own story, but then also the dads that you work with, like kind of the different pressures that they feel and the stressors, and then how to work through that. And then for their partner, like how to recognize that and help. But before we get into all that, I'm kind of curious, like, how would you describe, like, what is the modern dad of today? Because I think that has changed a lot. And like, what are, I guess, some of their biggest stressors? Because, if you look back, not really that long ago, it was, they were for sure like the breadwinner, like they were the provider. And then now that dynamic has shifted a little bit. Has it taken the pressure off of men, or is there almost even more pressure? Wow,
that's a great question. You're asking me to sum up like the whole like existence of men.
Just your opinion is fine.
No, I know. If I looking at it today, I would say dads. I'm going to focus on dads because I think that's my market, and that's who I work with the most. So young, I would say even millennial, even like younger generation X dads are different than our fathers in big ways. And I think part of it is we want to be different. Part of it is we want to be better than our dads were. Not that our dads, like my dad's generation, it was the breadwinner. They busted their butt. They worked to provide for their family. But as far as emotional connection, as far as like even physical connections, a lot of times, unless it was, getting a spanking or a butt whooping for me, like that, then I wasn't able to connect with my dad in that way. And seeing that and recognizing that I wanted that relationship with him, that was a great pivot point. We have a great relationship now, but we had to work through a lot of baggage that I carried from my childhood. But I didn't want that for my kids. I knew right off the bat, like, I want to be different in that way. Like, I want to be affectionate. I want to be constantly telling them I love them. I want to be present. I want to be connected with them. So I knew that. I think today's generation, today's dads are recognizing that. They're saying, you know what? We want to be better. And not that our dads were bad, like they did the best they could. It was all they knew how to do. Like, it wasn't their fault. It wasn't their fault. So I'm not like blaming the last generation or anything, like baby boomers. Like, no, they didn't know any better. And then as far as the transition from let's talk about the pressures, right? When you talk about the pressure of providing income and how, yes, it is split within the house, but there's still something innate within myself. I'm just speaking for myself. Like I can't speak for all men. I know all the dads I work with, I would say they're very similar and they feel the same way, is that we feel this responsibility. And regardless of whether the society is like, no, you don't have to worry about it, your wife can work. Or even if your wife works, which mine does as well, like I still feel this innate pressure to provide and to be a provider for my family in a major way. And so I think even though society has shifted in a way that women are working and even becoming the main breadwinners, I think in some ways there's still that like inner like masculinity, right? Like that's built into us, even genetically, like DNA wise, like we want to provide, like we want to go hunt, right? Like it's that hunter mentality. Like we still have that embedded in our DNA, and like we want to go provide and we want to hunt for our family, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally does. And I can buy into that for sure. And I know a lot of couples where the wife makes more than the husband, but you still see the husband very stressed out. Like, it's not like they take that like, oh, okay, great, you got this, honey, I'm gonna like sit back and like kick my heels up. Like there still is that stress and that pressure to provide for the family. And maybe it is just kind of wired into y'all's DNA, or maybe it's part of just kind of like the role you think you're here to play, like kind of part of the purpose of being a man. But I definitely still see that.
Yeah. I think it's still very prevalent. And I think it's shifting. Yes. But I think it also, like, I know personally, it creates kind of confusion at some points, right? It's like what is my role here? No, and like I know, like we know, like I know, I keep pointing my wife's here as well. Like she's in the background working, but you know what? Like there's still confusion, I think, and I think that can create confusion as well for a lot of guys. It's like, okay, how do I navigate this? Because a lot of the men I talk to that, yes, like their wives, like you were saying, like are the breadwinners. They want to provide for their family, and they have this innate like desire, but they don't know how to fulfill that. And I think that can be. And I'm not a psychologist, right? But I think that can be weighing on the man as well, as like, I have this desire, but I'm not able to fulfill that. And so it like takes something away from him. And and I don't know, like that could probably be, again, not a psychologist, but that could probably express itself in different ways in different areas of their relationship as well. So I could see how that would impact a man. Yeah.
Right. So how did it change for you? Like, the pressure or the stress level, like when you had your kid, like was there a significant like realization of added pressure and stress, or did that come almost a little bit delayed, or did you start to freak out the minute you guys were pregnant? Like how did that play out in your mind?
I think that's the better point. Like, cause if it was just a man and a woman, right? Like, and let's say like we didn't have kids and my wife was crushing it and like I could stay at home and do nothing, like that would be bored, right? But like I think you're right. Like when you have the kids, like it like or something shifts, and I know it did in my brain. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is very real. Like I've got I've got this human being that I helped create. At least I had a little part.
Yeah.
But I now want to do anything I can in my power to give them the best life possible. And so I definitely think that has an impact, mentally for guys.
And then it's interesting because then, all right, so you have that same pressure from, DNA, hundreds and hundreds of years, generations or whatever.
Right.
And then this new pressure to also be there, like be a different type of dad than the dad you had. And again, nothing wrong with our parents' generation, but to be home earlier, to be more affectionate, to be more involved. And there's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a crazy dynamic, right? It's almost like two like opposite things happening at the same time, and they do tug at themselves sometimes. And I think that's where there's been this whole movement, I think, to like demasculinize, right? I don't even know if that's a word. Like I don't to take masculinity down a notch, and not this super alpha male. But I think it can go too far sometimes too, and I think that's what's like a lot of men are stuck in this dynamic where they don't want to be this like jerk, this alpha that like not present with their kids, but they want to be present. But yet sometimes like we haven't had that example. So like we don't know how. Like we're just doing the best we can. We're like trying to read books, we're doing self-help stuff, we're meditating, we're doing like emotional intelligence training. It's like we're doing all this stuff. We're trying to become a better man, but a better person, so that we can be patient, that we can be connected with our kids. But at the same time, like our dads were disconnected with us, and physically, emotionally, verbally abusive sometimes, and so that's challenging. And so I think there's a lot of, I guess the right word would be tension in kind of the society and the way that men are evolving as far as dads go.
It's interesting because I think women are in a similar weird evolving standpoint. It's like we're all trying to do it all. So, whereas men historically were just the provider, and so kind of the being involved in the kid's life, well, not a lot of pressure there. Now that's kind of changing, and now it's like you're supposed to be both, as you were just saying. And then women, it's like the exact mirror opposite. So we were like in the kitchen, then fought to get out of the kitchen, and then now there's pressure to be in the kitchen and at work, juggling a million things. So it's like we have the same struggle. It's just coming from like different angles.
That's so true. Like we're almost like meeting in the middle, right? And now we come to this place where it's like, okay, what do we do now? We've both got what we wanted, I think, but now are we still happy with it? And I think that's kind of like, are we happy with the place where we've come? And that's an answer I don't know. I would definitely say that it's a better place than what it was. But it still presents a lot of challenges moving forward. It's like, what's next? How does this whole thing evolve? And how does the dynamic between breadwinners and providers and men, and like how do we, and it's not just like socially like westernized gender like roles, but it's also like you said, and like we talked about, like the DNA that's built into us. Like we have these random desires, like we have these like urges to do certain things, and we like we suppress them, and like we push them down sometimes, and it's like that can cause a lot of issues too. So it's we're in this crazy dynamic. That's so true though. Like we're like meeting in the middle. Like
and it's like now
there's a lot of like dual income households, right? Like that's so prevalent now.
And now there's just no clearly defined roles. So and I had a similar conversation in a previous episode. We were talking about dating, and so same in the dating world. There's no clearly defined, I guess, gender roles anymore, and so everyone is stuck kind of like, all right, well, who's supposed to do what?
So I saw So I saw a K's commercial the other day, and the woman proposed to the man. Ooh. It was the first one that I had seen like that, and I like told my wife, I'm like, that's crazy. But that is a complete change. You know what I mean? And I don't know. Like it's just. Like how far does that go? Like where does it end? And it can change, right? Social norms are just social norms. You can change the norm, but it's like, I don't know. It's different for us, right? Because we grew up in a different way, or with different norms. And so it's just not normal for us, but at the same time, it's not inherently wrong. There's nothing wrong with it.
Now I think it's almost like we're getting to this time where there is no normal. Any kind of normal is being broken down, which there's good to that, and then it can get confusing and people can get upset because they're very attached to the way things were, and it just, that's a whole other rabbit hole in the conversation. Okay, but I want to get back to, because you mentioned like, we do all this stuff to be more present and like meditate and all that stuff, and I love that you said that, because I think it's great, but I would argue that I don't know that all men are doing all that stuff. No. So like when your clients come to you and they're trying to start a business or whatever, they're stressed out, like what is kind of the first thing that you do with them to, because I'm going to guess that it's more mindset related than it is actual like business tactic related, because we tend to just stand in our own ways. So how do you start to get men who maybe aren't doing some of that, we'll call it like self-care work or whatever, some of that stuff just I feel like lives more in like the women's world, but it's moving over into the men's world, but I don't know that all men are bought into it. So like, how do you approach that with them, that they've got to kind of be more present and take care of themselves and find time to, work through their stress in like a healthy way?
It's a challenge. And well, what I'll tell you too, like Casey, is that what I found to be true, it's a spectrum of men. A lot of the when I very first got started, it was helping dad entrepreneurs or dads really launch businesses. And so it was a lot of dads that had never been in the entrepreneurial space. They never had this concept of entrepreneurship. They didn't understand that world at all. And so it was teaching them about the online business world and helping them start their business, their coaching business, their online business, so forth. Now, my business, if you look at it, I still help some of those individuals. A lot of that work was mindset work. I would say like 95% of that work was all mindset work. It was all identity type work. It was all like clarifying who you want to work with, like all those types of things you have to work through as you build this concept of what a business is and who you're trying to talk to and coach. And so that was where I got my beginning. But what I would say has been interesting is now that I work predominantly with coaches and entrepreneurs that already have businesses, that either they already have a semi-successful coaching business on the side, or they're already have built a full-time online coaching business where they're making close to 6 figures or more. Those types of individuals, typically the reason they got to where they are is because they were already practicing some of these other things. And it's kind of interesting, like the entrepreneur type. I think we realize very quickly that a lot of us are high achievers, right? Pretty much all of us. Like we wouldn't be doing this if we weren't. Mm-hmm. So the high achievers, we're trying to achieve so much. And even though we're high achievers, that doesn't mean we're able to handle our anxiety good. Like it doesn't mean we're able to handle all of this achievement and doing all these things. And so I think what we had to do is by necessity figure out, okay, the alcohol and the drugs wasn't cutting it, because most entrepreneurs have some type of addiction tendencies or they have some alcoholism. Like it's very prevalent in the entrepreneur world, but they've realized like that's not healthy. And so they got into mindfulness, they got into meditation, they got into prayer, they got into all these different things, these, breathing exercises and essential oils and like all these different things that there is out there, like to help themselves deal with the pressure of being a high achiever and having all this anxiety by necessity. And so I think that's been an interesting shift to see, like, as I work with more straight entrepreneurs that are already successful, it's different.
So what would you say to a dad who is not in the entrepreneurial world? So maybe doesn't have a tendency towards, even considering meditation, essential oils, any of that, like maybe has a little bit more of an old school mindset of, I'll go work out to relieve stress, but that's kind of the only outlet that he's aware of. Like, how would you explain to somebody like that the need for or the benefits of, and I'm not saying it necessarily has to be meditation, but finding some way to deal with stress other than, tossing back a bunch of beers?
Yeah. Well, I was there. I mean, if I'm looking at a man right now and he's in that position, which I have had this conversation a lot, is I grew up in upstate South Carolina, in a very, very conservative home with a very, very conservative, like, grandfather and dad who raised me in such a way where you're a man's man. You don't hold a man's hand. You numb the pain with alcohol, right? And that was the world that I grew up in. And so for me to realize that it's not the healthy way, what I would say to those men that would listen to this is just be a little bit open-minded to it. Because I'm not saying go out and do it in a group setting, because it's awkward as hell sometimes. It's weird to do these things because they're not normal to us, right? We talked about social norms earlier, like they're not normal to us. And it takes practice too. Like it took me a while to get good at meditating. It took me a while to go to these different levels of meditation. And while it seems like taboo, it seems like this woo-woo stuff, it brings me to different levels of peace in my heart and my mind, and it clears me out, like mindset-wise. It gets me to a whole different level where before I started meditating, before I started, doing these practices, I was never able to even get close to these types of things with alcohol, with drugs. Those things were just numbing mechanisms. If anything, they hurt my opportunity to open up my mind and experience the world. And when I started practicing these things, I had more passion in my life. I had more love in my life. It's crazy, like the shift that happens in your mind when you meditate and when you do these practices where you're more patient. Like it just comes naturally. Like you can handle situations better. And so that's what I would say to those men is like, just be a little bit open-minded to it and try it in your own home by yourself. Like get an app, just try it, and try it consistently, I think is the big thing. Like you can't just try it once, try it consistently for maybe a week or 2 weeks and just see if you get a little impact, see if you like it, and then just keep practicing.
Yeah, it's such a good point about, you have to have an open mind. Like that is key. But I mean, now, I like to think that meditation is moving a little bit out of the, considered woo-woo. I mean, there is like legit science out there now that shows the benefits of meditation. Absolutely. But I think there is still this hesitancy for men to try it more so than women. And I'm sure it goes back to kind of this, well, that's not quote unquote manly. So I love that advice of just kind of secretly try it. Like you don't have to tell anyone you're doing it.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah. Do it for a couple weeks, see if you feel better. And then like, that's it. No one necessarily needs to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the big thing. Like socially, men feel like it's not manly, but the reality is that's a westernized thing where that only goes back probably 3 or 4 generations where we thought this wasn't a manly thing, right? I mean, if you look at Western, Eastern society and like the Middle East and all those areas, like meditation still is a huge part of their upbringing and how they live. And
I heard something or I read something. I wish I could remember where. I never can. That meditation is actually better for men, or men can benefit from it more than women on average because of like the way that y'all's brains work, that you can benefit from that kind of that quiet time in that space more so than we can. And so I think that in the East, where like a lot of where it all came from, I think men meditate more than women do.
I would believe it. I would highly believe it. And I think some of that could come back to the innate pressures, right, that we talked about earlier. Like how do we deal with these pressures? And maybe it's through these other practices. And I think part of the issue too, and like, so I grew up conservative, like Southern Baptist, right? Mm-hmm. And so in the South, like if you talk about meditation, even if you talk about drinking alcohol in Southern Baptist church, they're like, get out of here. Like, we don't want anything to do with you. So coming out of that and still exploring my Christianity, which I'm a Christian, but yet implementing these other practices from the Middle East that enhance my Christianity. I think that was part of the issue, is like this conservative westernized Christianity, which is predominantly in the US, right? Mm-hmm. That has skewed a lot of people's belief systems. Like, oh, you can't do yoga. That's against God. Like, no, like it actually can enhance your connection with God. It just so happens that you believe in God's son, Jesus. So that was like the big thing for me, is like come from super conservative, like Southern Baptist, to like, oh, no. This is like, I can dump these other practices on top of my beliefs and enhance them to a level where I had no clue I could.
So that's a really good point. I hadn't even really thought about that. So like on top of the gender component, there's for a lot of people, the religious upbringing component, and a lot of the mindfulness, meditation, yoga, essential oils, acupuncture, like all this
all of the devil,
Eastern
right?
stuff. Yeah, it doesn't fall in line with a lot of the teachings of some of the Western religions. So that you're right, that is a whole other component. So that goes back to like, you've got to have that open mind to even explore some new things, or maybe remove some of the barriers that you have to certain activities in order to even attempt to benefit from them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the whole thing, is just let down the barrier and realize that those things were used to enhance people's mindset, right? Or they were used to create clarity or clear people's minds and do these things that would relieve stress so that they could connect better with God. And so I think just because they were connected directly to other religions, the Christians in a big way have dismissed a lot of that, which they've dismissed a lot as well, like spiritual gifts, but we don't have to get into all that.
Yeah, but, I was going to say that. Don't get me on
the forgotten. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't get me started on the spiritual stuff. I will derail this conversation immediately.
No. Yeah. There's been a whole, So I think that's the exploration for a lot of people that were raised in that conservative or even Westernized Christian background. I would say just realize that it doesn't hurt your religion. It doesn't hurt your Christianity or your beliefs. It really can enhance them and take you to a whole new level, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great point. Okay. I want to talk about the spouses or the partners for a minute. Like when you're a dad and you're feeling all this pressure, and then maybe you are starting your own business online, or maybe you've just got a promotion in normal corporate America, you're trying to climb the ladder or whatever it is, like you also are trying to be there in your kids' lives, and so you're feeling all this stress. What do you think is most helpful for the partner to try and support a man who is in that situation? Like, should they try and kind of nudge them to try stuff like meditation? Should they just let them figure it out and kind of just be there? Like, on average with the guys that you work with, and even just yourself, are you open to people kind of nudging you to try some new things? Or is it more just like, I'm already handling too much, like, don't tell me what to do? Like, what can the partners do?
Well, my answer is going to be specific to me, but what I'll say to this answer as well, Casey, is like every personality type is going to be different. So like every personality type for men and women will depend on how they need to process things. And like my wife and I were actually at a friend's house recently. We were talking through this whole thing of like different personality types and like we were talking about what we are and like all these different things. But I process things in a way that like I have to really think about things. Like I have to be by myself. I've got to think about things. I've got to process things. Whereas my wife, she wants to know like, what's the next step? Like, what are we doing? Like, what's next? What have you done? What have we, she wants results. She wants answers. She's a doer, very much a type A. Whereas I'm not. I'm more of a creative. I'm more of a thinker. And so for me, like, I feel attacked if she comes at me that way. And she knows this, and we have, this is part of, discovering relationships. But I think I'm specifically talking about my marriage, is that we've had to learn, and we've been through marriage counseling. We've had, after the addiction issues and all of that stuff, rebuilding from that, we've learned how to communicate, which is the biggest thing now. It's like, we're not perfect. Like we still have our moments, right? But I'd really like to talk to you about kind of what's going on. Or it's just reframing it in such a way where you're not telling them something, or you're like, I want to open up a dialogue about something. I think that's the biggest thing that a spouse can do across the board, or a partner, whatever. I'd like to talk to you about this. Do you have some time later? Can we make some time for this? Instead of, you just got home from work, like, I'm going to talk to you about this right now.
I've got this on my mind, and so I need to talk about it right now, and I need to know what we're doing.
Exactly. Which that's not all women, and that's not all men, and so I don't want to generalize, but at least specifically for me, I know that that's been super helpful. Is let's frame it in such a way where it's out there. I know she wants to talk about these things, and it gives me some time to think about it. It gives us some time to schedule. And then I know, okay, I'm going into this with the right mindset instead of just coming home and being, like you said, stressed or whatever, and walking into that situation. So I think communication, setting it up and framing it in such a way where it's, hey, I'd like to discuss some of these bam, bam, bam things with you. Not right now. Think about it. And then I'd like to discuss it maybe later when the kids go to bed and we have some time to decompress and sit one-on-one. Is that okay with you? And, and like, it's almost asking for that affirmation instead of just coming at somebody. I think opening up a dialogue is a huge game changer, and it has been for us in our marriage.
Yeah, I mean, communication is definitely key. And I think you bring up a really good point, because you're right. It isn't necessarily that all men need to process and all women are like, I want to talk about it immediately. But it's the bigger point is like there are different communication styles. So to recognize like what yours is and what your partner's is. Like I have a female friend whose boyfriend he needs to step away and think and process. I have a female friend who is she needs to step away and process. Exactly. So I don't think gender matters so much more there. It's just more
personality type.
Yeah, personality type. Okay. Yep. The last thing I really want to ask you about is creativity. So, you mentioned like you are a creative, but I think that's another one of those things that hasn't lived in the quote unquote masculine world for a while now.
Sure.
What role do you think some form of creativity, whether it be, something art related or writing or even, I don't know, I think entrepreneurship even falls within creativity because you're thinking something up, like you are creating something. What role does that play in relieving stress?
That's a great question. And I think I'm still learning the answer to that, honestly. I know the answer. I know it can play a huge role because I grew up a musician. So I played guitar since I was 6 years old and wrote a lot of music, played in a lot of bands growing up. And I got away from it because after college, I got my traditional job. I was working all the time. Like I had, got married, and we started our life very quickly. And so it was like, bam, bam, bam. I don't have time for music.
Yeah.
And so what's been really cool is like now that I'm an entrepreneur and can create more space for that, like I've been more intentional. I'm still like, don't play music as much as I need to. But I wholeheartedly believe, and one of my goals for 2020 is to play my guitar more and to write more music. And so that is incorporating that back in is so important because it gives you space to get out of your head, like get out of like, I got to pay the bills. I got to do this. I got to like all the basic mundane stuff. And it says, okay, I'm going to another place in my mind where I can create stuff. And it's like the right brain, left brain thing, right? I need to go back to that space. And it's the same thing, same reason for meditation is because I'm able to clear my mind, of all of that and move back to a place where I'm able to clearly think. I'm able to process things. And I think it can apply, like you said, to business as well. I mean, my entrepreneurship, like I create courses, I create content every single day that is like thought provoking. Like I'm like, okay, I'm about to do a podcast, right? What am I going to do a podcast on? And like you start to do podcast, you start to do like 90, 100, you get to that level of you're like, I don't even know what to talk about now. But you have a framework and you continue to be creative and continue to pull from your environment, which I think is really cool too. Like when you're creative, what I've noticed is we pull our creativity from our environments. And so it makes you be more aware of your environment. You're like, okay, oh, that's cool. I like you start paying attention more to things that you can start to pull from different areas. But yeah, I think it plays a huge role.
Yeah, which is then like present moment, like coming into the present moment if you're aware of your environment.
Exactly.
So do you encourage your clients to find some kind of or incorporate or get back to some kind of creative outlet in their lives?
The biggest one has been journaling. I mean, I journal daily, and I'm an audio guy. Like I love my podcast, right? Like I actually do it on my phone a lot too, it's so easy. But like I do audio messages, and so I have like an audio journal. And so I think journaling, however you best do that, that's what I tell my guys is like, you have to get your thoughts out sometimes. And even if it doesn't make sense, or like gratitude journals are incredible, and they've been really powerful for me. And so like my gratitude journal lives on my Google Drive, and I literally just turn on my camera through Google Drive, through my drive, and just record a video. Like sometimes I'll be in the car, like I'm not even looking at the video. I just want the audio. Right. And so I think that's important. And what I coach is find a way to like, if you're a writer, write. If you like audio, record a podcast and just record your thoughts and start talking, share your voice. If you like video and you like to be on video, which I kind of do sometimes, then I'll record videos. Like whatever your thing is, whatever you feel most comfortable with, start sharing, because that's the hardest part, is like being vulnerable and sharing our stories. Like it took me a while, like before, like when I broke my addiction, I was so scared to tell people that I was an addict. Like, but now it's like, it's a part of my story. It's a part of my growth. And so anyway, I know a lot of men that go through that as well. And so I think, yeah, absolutely. I tell them and teach them journaling in whatever fashion, and then sharing that journal with other people is the hardest.
That's taking it to a whole other level.
Well, and that's what we do, right? That's what we do as creatives, like our blogs, our journals. A lot of times we're pouring our hearts out into these things, and that's what attracts other people. That's what attracts our tribe of people, because they're going through this similar situation, or they're behind us, right, in as far as their path, and we can pull them forward because we've been through that. And so if we don't share that, then first of all, we're doing them a disservice and the world a disservice, but we're also doing ourselves a disservice because we're not providing that voice. We're not sharing our message.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think you and I are in similar positions where, that's kind of part of our goal and our journey and our purpose, or whatever you want to call it, is to share the story. But I would argue that isn't necessarily everybody. So it's kind of like the, go meditate by yourself secretly, like same thing. Like I believe in the power of journaling, because I that's how I published my book. Essentially, it was like a journal. So, and I believe in the power of sharing your story, but I also, I don't know that is for everybody. And so if anything, I would want step one, like just find some outlet. Maybe it's journaling, maybe it's guitar, maybe it's drawing or doodling or whatever. And if without the pressure of feeling like you have to share it, I think some of us are meant to share, and others are going to process things just a little bit more privately.
Sure. And that's fine. And I don't mean share it. And I should rephrase, like, I don't mean share it to where you're on like Facebook or on a podcast like us. You don't have to do that. Now, the dads I work with, they want to be entrepreneurs online. They're going to have to share. Like to create a tribe, to create that following, they're going to have to become vulnerable, as you know, like to create that trust with people. So like, that's why I coach that, is like, you've got to put your story out there. Otherwise, what are you doing? Right. But I 100% agree. Like, I think you're absolutely right. Like there are people who maybe don't want to share, but what I would say is maybe it's not on a public platform, but I still think it's good to share with other people. And maybe it's friends, maybe it's a small group that's just, whatever, but I still think it's good to bounce ideas. It's good to have other people's feedback as well.
Yes, no, I agree with that. Totally. Because I think it's a multi-step process. You have to start to process your own feelings and thoughts and stress. And then you do need, once you're okay with it and you kind of accept yourself, then it's time to start sharing it with the people closest to you. So especially like your partner, because then they know what's going on with you, and can help, because that goes back to what we're talking about, communication. Absolutely. Okay. Awesome. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. It was a fun little insight into a man's mind, which, and also a dad's mind. Like I have, my sister and my brother-in-law have kids now. My brother, he's got kids. And so it's been interesting to watch this transformation of them becoming dads. And you can see that there is some added stress there. So I was kind of curious what's going on in y'all's heads in that regard. Tell everybody where they can find you, follow you, just all the things.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Casey. So first of all, thank you for having me on. It was an incredible conversation. I love talking about these things because it's like, I never get to talk about it like my perspective. And you always have to be careful. You're like, I don't want to say the wrong thing, like as a guy, right? But
see, I think, even that, like, there's no wrong thing as a guy.
You got to be careful. You got to be careful.
I know.
And so, but no, I appreciate you having me on. And so, where you can find me is just Ben Snelling everywhere, basically, on Instagram, on Facebook is where I hang out the most. But what I would like to share as well is, so I just put out a book. So you're talking about perspectives of dads. So I've been recording a podcast for several years, and what I did, I was asking this question about their legacies. And so dad perspectives on how the pressures they feel and what they want to leave behind. And so I turned that into an audio book that people can go check out. And so it's just uncoveryourlegacy.com. It's free. They can get the audio book for free. So that's just a cool little benefit, added value that they can get and check out.
That's awesome. Very cool. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming on the show, especially traveling. Enjoy the rest of your travels.
Awesome. Thanks, Casey. Appreciate you.